Good evening, freedom fighters. Welcome to me. Woohoo!
We're here to talk all about how to buy a rental property in 2023. It's exciting.
Before we get started, let's just do a little intro. I haven't done a live for ages. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name's Belinda. I work with strategic coaching for our lovely members. I'm one of the lovely faces you see when you decide you want to get involved in our amazing company and our tribe of like-minded investors. And lovely Charmaine is our head coach.
Correct. Thank you. Yes, it's been a while, Belinda. It's great to connect with you.
We haven't done a face live for ages. I feel like, what's going on?
It's been way too long, but we're here tonight and we're super excited because we love talking all things property, particularly about how to get started, how to buy a rental property. And it's such an exciting time right now in investing in property. And Belinda and I are really going to go through some of the fundamentals. Please, if you have any questions, just type in your questions into the chat and we'll be able to support you. So Belinda, let's start this off. I want to buy a rental property. How do I start?
Okay, so the 3 beginner steps. So realistically, guys, make sure you've got your pen and paper ready because this is some really good stuff tonight.
It's not written, it's not real. So we want to write this down because we're changing lives and creating our reality. We're becoming sophisticated investors.
Correct. If it's not written, it's not real. So, okay, so number 1. So to buy a rental property in 2023, number 1, the first thing you've really got to nut out is understanding what your borrowing capacity is.
Absolutely. Okay?
So realistically, what that means is what can you afford? What's in your budget? What are you going to do? So obviously being one of our head coaches, how do we go about that, Charmaine?
Fantastic. Thanks for asking. So getting a borrowing capacity is probably one of the biggest steps when it comes to property investing, and ensuring that you have the right mortgage manager is super important. And here at Positive Property, we have our dream team. We call them the Circle of Safety. Your dream team, your Circle of Safety, they're really here to do most of the heavy lifting, and you really want to have the supreme experts in your corner, particularly when it comes to getting a borrowing capacity. Because if you're working with an elite mortgage manager, it means there's more opportunities and strategies to be able to get a borrowing capacity. And that means sitting down with a mortgage manager or a broker, running through the numbers, getting a really clear understanding of your financial situation so that they can come up with a borrowing capacity. And this is the biggest step because it's not as easy as it sounds, because there is a lot of paperwork that you need to supply, evidence you have to supply. And this usually deters a lot of people when they're putting their fact finds together. But it's a very important step because once you've got that borrowing capacity, you know exactly what you can afford. That's when property investing gets super excited, because then the next step is let's find that great property that's going to give you that cash flow and give you that great equity.
Now, look, in saying that as well, going out and trying to get a borrowing capacity through some of the banks might not always be the best scenario.
Not at all, because the banks are only...
We've got the 4 or 5 richest banks in Australia. There's a reason. They're a business. So a lot of the time, they're not really willing to kind of budge. And it's very easy. Like we've seen in the past, like single mums and dads and, divorcees, or even, kind of over that 60+ mark, they'll get easily rejected from the banks. So the funny thing is people don't realize there's so many lenders out there. Mm-hmm. And let me give you an example. If you're having a party and you're having to bring all the drinks along, I mean, wouldn't you go to Coles, Aldi, Woolies to kind of work out where you're going to get the best drinks? Well, why wouldn't you do that with your finance? Shopping around and having a look at all your options. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And the one thing you've got to remember is banks are only interested in one party, the bank. They're not interested in your best financial situation. So when you work with a mortgage manager, they're looking at you. What is the best scenario for you? And they will match you up to the right lender to make sure that you're getting the most benefits when it comes to your borrowing capacity and investing in property and getting the right structuring, the right package together for you. Whereas the banks, they only look out for number 1, the bank.
That's it. Oh, did you see my that's kind of finding the square peg with the square hole sometimes. That was my little my little movement for that. So
Absolutely.
it's all really about finding and matching up.
That's right. And it's really important because we've had members before. Like I've got one member in particular that went to 7 different mortgage managers and they kept saying, no, we can't get you finance. And this was purely based on her age. She had plenty of equity, really good income. And this is why when you're looking for a mortgage manager, you also want to make sure you're getting the best of the best. And here at Positive Property, we interview all of our circle of safety. We make sure we're getting the best of the best. And when this member signed up, one of our mortgage managers was able to get her lending. And it took her eight different mortgage managers prior to us, and then coming along on board with us and getting that right mortgage manager that just knew how to present her the best to lenders to get her serviceability, which is an amazing outcome.
Absolutely. Now, the reality is, she gets an outcome, she gets a property. Fast forward, imagine if she gave up after, the first 2 times where she got rejected. And, now the future. I mean, look, you've got to really choose your hards in these scenarios.
And this is where mindset plays a pivotal point, because you've got to have the right mindset. And she was not willing to give up. She was willing to do whatever it takes, because deep down she knew she could do it. It was just a matter of finding the right experts. And here at Positive Property, that's what we make sure we have, is the right experts, our dream team, our circle of safety that really does the heavy lifting for us.
Absolutely, 100%. So, that's really important. So, getting back to number 1, as we said, borrowing capacity, affordability, knowing what you can, because there's no point going out looking for a property and you get really excited and then you go back and the banks or the lenders say, hey, sorry, you can only afford a certain amount.
Correct.
So, and look, I usually say as well, a good broker, it's almost like dressing you up in your finances, a nice suit, and finding the right lender willing to play ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's a great analogy.
Nice little suit. They've got to make sure the tie's pressed and there's no kinks out. So there's a lot involved to really make sure that you get the right lender. Absolutely. So that's number 1.
So we've covered number 1, getting a borrowing capacity, getting your financial house in order. What is number 2?
Number 2. Excellent. Okay. So number 2 would be obviously, look, it comes down to a bit of research and really understanding the market, but understanding the property clock in Australia, or market timing cycles. All right.
Correct. That's a big one.
It's a big one. It's a big one. And a lot of people don't really understand, but realistically, there's all different property clocks around Australia. And
that's right. We've got 16,000 suburbs Australia-wide, and 16,000 suburbs have their own property clock. And then you've got every state has its own property clock as well.
And then you've got the pockets within the pockets.
That's right.
So look, one thing about George, he's been studying the market for a very long time. He's been doing this since his 20s. So, and, he did make a lot of mistakes in the early days, and he doesn't kind of hold back in sharing that stuff. But the reality is he's been following watching up to 90 years of cycles in Australia. And it is cycles. And a lot of those cycles are really based on, if we look at the kind of the data or the economics behind it, it could be population growth. It can be things like government spending, economics, job creation. There's a whole range of different things that you've really got to take into consideration.
Correct.
But really what it comes down to, I suppose people say to me, well, I don't understand the property clock. What does it mean? Well, let's just put it in a really simple scenario. A 12 o'clock market is a peak. You don't want to be buying the peak of market.
Do not buy.
Do not buy. Because look, if you're buying in a peak of the market, it's overpriced, and then it's going to go into correction, because you can't have a market just grow forever. Impossible. Correct. So the reality is, it's really important that we actually only buy at the beginning of a recovery, which is kind of down here, and it kind of moves its way up. So if you get involved in that peak, well, you own the property, more equity for you. Woohoo!
So if we're not buying in a 12 o'clock market, Belinda, where should we be looking on the clock itself? Are we looking at a 7 o'clock market?
So look, Sorry, just so we've got a little bit of tech here. We've just had excited to be on board. Did you just bring that up? Was that you?
I did. So we've just got,
because we've got a couple of questions that have just come up. Someone just wrote, exciting. How do we study the market like George did? Well, the reality is George has got, without kind of releasing his age, even though we're talking 38 years of studying. So the reality is it's not something that you can learn at university. We say that George got a QBA. He's qualified by experience. So the reality is, how do we study the market like George did? Well, the reality is I just get George to give me his advice. You know, he's done it. He's got a lot of properties. He's already doing it. And I suppose that's the reality of being a part of a membership, because he talks to his members a lot about this kind of stuff, but that's more in our private group. Because obviously at the end of the day, if we were to talking about all our hotspots and case studies and all that, it's almost like telling where a fisherman, where the fish are, and then otherwise all the other people would fish there and there wouldn't be any fish there. So, someone's just written, if you want to go to the next message while we're just kind of going through, if it's relevant to number 2.
This is our public group. So our members group will be coming on board at 6:35 Australian Eastern Standard Time. You would have received a Zoom link for that private group. And in that private group, we can go into the property clock in a little bit more detail for our members.
Correct. So, and then the next one was, does the clock ever reverse in some subs? Look, it's not a matter of reversing. It doesn't reverse. It still goes through the clocks. It just goes obviously a little bit faster. And I mean, we saw a lot of that when we went to COVID here in Melbourne, because obviously anyone who lived in the lovely state of Victoria and the city of Melbourne, we did go through almost 2 years of lockdown. And then what we found was obviously there was a lot of Melbourneites jumping, it was like the rats jumping off the burning ship. They kind of decided, no, we're not staying in Melbourne, and they went interstate. So the reality was that really fastened up some suburbs where people were just moving out of Melbourne and going into other areas. And I mean, one prime example is places like country areas like Mildura. That went through the roof overnight because people were starting to live out in the country. The reality is now that obviously things have come down with COVID, they're coming back in the cities again.
Correct.
So it's all about understanding those cycles and, you know, population growth and where people and where the jobs are and things like that. So really important. And look, realistically, it comes down to data. And one thing about George, like he's a real data expert. There's one thing to be able to buy data, but there's another thing to be able to read it, understand it, and analyze it, but also make predictions.
That's part of the interpretation, and the interpretation comes with years of experience. And there are many different data sources that you can actually get a lot of your data so that you can attempt to begin to understand the property clock and the timing. But there is a certain level of experience that comes with that, like Belinda said, in being able to interpret that data so that you can pinpoint where those growth areas are going to be, so you can leverage off that growth and continue to build a successful portfolio. And George has cracked his algorithm, and like George has been very open book about it. He started off, he did all the wrong things and wasn't making money, and he had 2 doors. The door one was give up, or door 2 was work it out and keep pursuing. And he did. He worked it out. He had a lot of experts around him, coaches and mentors that he was leveraging from their information as well, so that he could work it out and get to where he is today. And our members have that opportunity to leverage from that algorithm so that we can begin investing in those top suburbs so we can capitalize on the growth.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And we call George a bit of a pioneer. He's got a few little arrows in his back, a few little scars, little war scars. But hey, he's made those mistakes so our members don't, and that's really important. How do you know when it's the right time to buy? Well, look, that really comes down to the research. It looks at the property prices in the area. That will actually come down to due diligence of that property
Is
as
that
well.
number 3? Is this your number 3 due diligence?
Well, actually, whoever put that question in we've only got Facebook users, so I don't know who it is, but really that's obviously the next part. So we'll hold back for that. So as I said, understanding the property clock and really being clear on the cycles and only buying within that kind of 7, 8 o'clock market is really important, and not getting caught up in like a peak market, which is really important.
And the other thing to also take into consideration as well is that when George is analysing his data and making his predictions, it changes every quarter. So you might know what the market cycle timing is now, but your finger's got to be on the pulse, because every quarter it can change. And so it's very important that you can change with the market data that comes through. It's
Absolutely.
almost like being fluid when it comes to the property market, because it can change and you want to be fluid so that you're always got your finger on the pulse of any changes, and you can really ride those waves in and score a good surf and leverage from it.
And, the funny thing is, even with our members, if we find a property, we're going to do, 30 to 40 downloads of data on that property before someone buys it. So it's so important to, not buy blind and really understand what's going on in that suburb, that area, that state before you jump in and buy those properties. And look, George spends a lot of money on data. There's no doubt about it. The beautiful thing is we get access to that data. But remember, Uncle Georgie, he's making a lot of money out of his properties. I think he can afford it. So we get access to it as members, right? Absolutely. So have we got any more questions there before we go on to number 3? Because I'm excited. Keep this going.
I think we get started with number 3. Tell us number 3, Belinda. I want to know, what is the next best step for us?
Number 3. So going back, how to buy a rental property in 2023. Beginner's step. We've done 1. We've done 2. Number 3 is having a cash flow calculator.
Love those numbers. Love those numbers. The numbers are
my
so
favorite.
important. Do not buy without doing the numbers. The amount of people I speak to that buy just because it looks good, sounds good, but actually haven't done the numbers is very scary.
Absolutely. Because, guys, at the end of the day, buying a piece of dirt doesn't guarantee you're going to make money. Correct. If you don't crunch the numbers, you're buying blind. That's really what it comes down to. Look, anyone can go and buy dirt, but whether it makes money is a whole nother thing, right? Very important. So you've got to crunch the numbers.
Correct, because the idea is you want to know that you can afford to hold that property. And one thing I do as a coach as well is that when I'm looking at a cash flow calculator with my members and we're going through the numbers, I'm not just basing it on today's interest rate. I'm forecasting. If the interest rate continues to go up, at what point does the interest rate hit before it becomes difficult for that member to be able to hold that property? This is why I think it's so important, because during this time where we've had interest rate rises quite frequently, which is a little bit outside the norm, our members are comfortable because we've already got the predictions already in the calculator. So when the interest rate rises, they're not freaking out going, oh no, what's that going to do to my cash flow? They're like, oh, that's okay, because I know it's not going to affect me until it hits this particular number. And this is peace of mind.
It's having that predicted, risk calculation as well. So,
correct.
Like I know for me as an investor, if I'm looking at the rents in the area, I'm going to put, things like kind of the lowest rent, not the highest rent, because I want to be kind of really conservative with my figures and almost look worst case scenario, because if it still works, anything above that, that's bonus town.
Well, correct. And that's where we like to under promise, over deliver. So we really buff the numbers up. We make a lot of the expenses just that little bit more, and we do a play around with the interest rate. We play around with the minimum amount of rental return that we might get, so that when we actually do the numbers, it's a great win for our members, because they can actually see that they're in a really good position. And most importantly, that it doesn't matter if interest rate rises, they know they can still afford to hold that property.
Absolutely, 100%. And realistically, at the end of the day, I always say to members when they're joining up, and, obviously, you've got to have the right system and strategy. You've got to find the right property, but you've also got to have that cash flow, and that it's actually going to work. So there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle before you actually buy the property. There's a lot
Correct.
of tick boxing before you buy that property, because realistically, you've got to be able to crunch the numbers. If it's financially not the right fit, don't buy the property.
Absolutely
It's not
not.
rocket science. You don't buy it. Doesn't matter if your neighbor just says, "Oh, you can buy my property. I'll give it to you for a bargain." But then you realize you might get it for a bargain, but then there's other rentals in the area. You've bought an older property. There's no tax deductions. You realize later that there's probably asbestosis in the back wall that you're going to have to remove. That's going to cost you a fortune. I mean, there's all these things to kind of consider, you know. And also buying in your own backyard doesn't guarantee it's going to make money. That goes back to number 2. Market cycle timing, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Absolutely. So cash flow calculators. Now, look, I'm more than happy. Look, we've got a cash flow calculator. I am more than happy to give you a copy. It's only blank, but it's got the formulas behind it. If there's anyone out there that wants to do it themselves, if you just want to put into the chat hashtag cashflowcow or cashflow, we will get you a copy of a cash flow calculator.
Absolutely. One of our team will reach out to you, send you a link so that you've got your own cash flow calculator to do the numbers. And it's super important. You want to know your numbers up front. You want your facts up front. You want to know exactly the position you're going to be. And you also want to play around with the forecasting of interest rates so that you're always in the best position moving forward.
Look, absolutely, 100%. And the whole idea is, you know, like even if you're pre-approved on a particular interest rate, you want to make sure you actually, you know, push that out and go worst case scenario and then crunch all the numbers again just to be sure. Absolutely. So anyone that's putting in cash flow, hashtag cash flow cow for sure. Absolutely. If one of our lovely team can get their information and we can email these lovely people a link.
Oh, I love this. Love this. Check this out, Belinda. Cash flow is king. That's what I'm talking about. I love it.
Cash flow is king. Even better. Absolutely. Hey, you just missed a question there. But there was a couple of little questions. If you just want to go down, there's a couple of people bringing some stuff in. You just jumped right ahead. We've got 2 more questions in there.
So this one here.
So looking at websites such as realestate.com and Domain are not the right places to get data?
Absolutely, because by that stage, by the time the property has hit those particular markets, you're not getting the best deal. And one thing that we do offer our members is that our properties are brought directly from builders and developers.
So you want to get rid of the middleman. That's great investing. Let's get rid of the middleman. No offense to any real estate agents or buyers agents out there. I'm sure you do a great job with what you do, but what we're doing, we want to really get rid of the middleman. But in regards to the data, some of the data is good, but it's only kind of like one kind of perspective of it. You need to look at lots of different, like a kaleidoscope of different data to really make the right decision on one area. Absolutely. So, you know, the realistic side is they're kind of trying to push properties on realestate.com. It's more of a sales scenario. What did someone write here? If you're not a member, you're really missing out. What are you waiting for? Hey.
Thank you. Obviously, one of our
very happy members.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
I must admit, you know, this is not just being a part of a membership. We're a part of a community of like-minded people. And we are a tribe of freedom fighters because that's exactly what we're all about.
And it's really important to have your tribe around you as well, because you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you really want to be successful in property investing, having investors around you, being part of a tribe where you're talking property, learning about property, it gets you excited, it motivates you, keeps you on track. Like, it's the surest path to success. Getting a mentor, getting a coach, having those support people around you so that they do the heavy lifting with you so that you get the results and the outcome you're looking to achieve. And it's so much fun in a tribe as well because everyone's high-fiving each other and supporting each other, and it's such a great feeling every time one of our members gets a property.
Oh, look, I get excited when our members get properties, just like I was buying my own property. Absolutely. AB, cash flow calculator. Look, we've got a lot of people coming through asking for that cash flow calculator. That's what we like to see. Very clever people in our audience tonight. That's fantastic. So let's just recap. So ideally, number one, you have 3 beginner steps of buying a rental property. Make sure you get your borrowing capacity and you know what you can afford before you run out and look for a property. That's number one. Number two, understanding the property clock in Australia and understanding the cycles so you know you're buying within that kind of 7, 8 o'clock market. And then number 3 is crunching the numbers, cash flow calculator. Really know the numbers up front. It's really important. Look, we've got a little bit of time. Have we got maybe a little cheeky number 4?
I think a little cheeky number 4. We've got about a couple of minutes.
Nothing wrong with a little cheeky.
Before we jump into our private group with our members. So, Belinda,
we are going. Absolutely. Okay, we'll go into cheeky 4.
All right, let's rapid fire. Let's do this.
All right. So the other one is also really making sure you break down and do up to 22 points of due diligence.
Yes.
22 points of due diligence. And I'll give you an example. We have a massive tick box of all the things that we go through with our members. We're not going to provide that. That's members only. But look, I'll give you a couple of little gems. So, things like understanding vacancy rates in that area. That's really super important. What about the yield? Is it a high growth? What about the growth yield? I mean, don't you want to know how much growth you're going to have in an area before you buy it? I mean, that to me sounds like a no-brainer, but I know that about 60-70% of Australians have got no idea what it is when they buy a property. Mm-hmm. It's nuts. Correct. But again, that's the difference between being an A-grade and an educated investor or being a novice. So, and that's going to be reflective of the results you get from that property.
Absolutely.
What about things like percentage of stock on the market? That's a
big one because that comes down to demand-supply ratio. We want to buy where there's a high demand and low supply. So
DSR, hello, happy days. What about things like online search interest? If there's a lot of people going on there pressing a button and looking at, I like this area and you're getting a lot of kind of activity, that's a good one too. What about long-term growth?
That's a great one. Long-term growth.
Affluence
score. What's an affluence score? What is the affluence score of an area? How wealthy is an area? How much money is coming into that area?
What about things like, it might sound simple, but what about the average income per household in that suburb?
Fertility rate, funny enough, is another big one because that's going to determine how many families are moving into that area.
Well, the whole average income per household, I mean, that'll work out the socioeconomic as well. Really important. What about things like, renter population to owner-occupied population? I mean, what's the percentage? I mean, you go through that kind of stuff in with all your due diligence. I mean, guys, that's only a couple. That's tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely. Due diligence is where it's at. It is one of the biggest steps that one must do once you've found the suburb, your property timing, finding the right property, going through a cash flow calculator, do the numbers work, but does the due diligence support?
Exactly. And, if you don't know your numbers, if you don't understand the clock, if you don't do your due diligence, well, guess what? You're buying blind.
Absolutely.
And if you're buying blind, I might as well post you right now a little blindfold with no idea written on it. Get your blindfold, get it in the mail, kids. Take it right now. But you don't want to. You need to be open-minded. You've got to be open-eyed and you've got to be realistic. And you've got to make sure you tick every little box. And guess when you do it? Before you buy the property.
Absolutely.
I mean, this to me seems like it's not rocket science. But how many properties do we get with members coming through that have bought properties to try and do it themselves? And they've just missed out so many areas, which we look at as just standard. Why? Because we've learnt it. We've done it. We understand the basic principles, and it's just standard. So,
we have the systems. Like Belinda said, we've got the checklist, we've got the systems. We know exactly what boxes need to be ticked so that we know what is the right property, what is the right area, for our members. And it's super important.
Absolutely. And, we can sit here and talk about, all this kind of stuff. And we can talk about investing and rental properties and buying and beginner's steps. But I actually thought there's actually one step before number one. How about getting educated about all this stuff before you go out and buy a property?
Absolutely. Now, Belinda, we are running out of time. Our members are waiting for us now next week.
I always get carried away. I could keep going forever on these lives.
Before we go, I love this. And set up that offset account. I love it. And that's another topic for another day, with actually how to structure all of your loans so that you can maximize your cash flow. But on that note, thank you so much, Freedom Fridays. It was great to see you all. It's been great. A pleasure, Belinda.
I hope that information was amazing. I look forward to seeing you next week, and write it all down, take it all in. If it's not written, it's not real. Guys, have a great week, and we'll see all of our members in the live. Happy days. Have a great day. Have a great week.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.